I was standing in my kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday morning when my son's wife smiled at me from across the breakfast table and said the words that would change everything. "Your mother leaves tomorrow, Malcolm. I mean it. Get her out." The coffee mug in my hand trembled. I could feel the ceramic heat against my palms, smell the burnt edges of the coffee I'd let sit too long on the burner, taste the bitterness that had nothing to do with caffeine. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows I'd cleaned for 32 years, hitting the hardwood floors I'd refinished twice, illuminating the kitchen where I'd packed thousands of school lunches and cooked countless Sunday dinners. My kitchen, in my house. Malcolm, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone from age 6 after his father walked out, looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. He nodded slowly, deliberately, like he'd rehearsed this moment. "Mom, Kiara, and I talked. It's time you found your own place." Time I found my own place. In the house I'd bought with 2 jobs and night classes. In the home I'd sacrificed everything to keep. In the sanctuary where I'd raised him in every single room. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs. The mug slipped slightly in my grip. I caught it before it fell, but the coffee sloshed over the rim, burning my thumb. I didn't feel it. Kiara sat at my breakfast table, the one I'd found at an estate sale in 1995 and refinished myself, wearing a satisfied smile. She was issuing an eviction notice from my own home. But here's what Malcolm and his wife of 3 months didn't know. What they couldn't have known, because I'd been very, very careful. I'd already made a call, one that would unravel everything they'd been planning. They'd forgotten something crucial. Something that would make their entire scheme collapse like a house of cards. And their timeline? It had just run out. If you've ever sacrificed everything for your child only to be pushed aside, subscribe. This story gets worse before it gets better. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments. What's holding you back? Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. Standing in my own kitchen, being told to leave by the son I gave up everything for. 8 months ago, Malcolm called me on a Sunday afternoon. That detail matters. He'd always called on Sundays since college. It was our thing, our tradition. He sounded happy, excited even. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Kiara's lease is ending next month, and with the wedding coming up, we're looking for a bigger place. Would it be okay if we stayed with you temporarily, just until we find something permanent?" I should have said no. Looking back now, I can see that so clearly. But in that moment, all I heard was my son asking for help, and I'd never been able to say no to that. "Of course," I told him. "You know you're always welcome here." I'd been planning to move to Savannah, to my sister Claudette's property. I'd been planning it for 2 years, my retirement dream. Convert my Atlanta house to a rental, generate income, finally relax after decades of working myself to exhaustion. But I postponed it. For Malcolm. Again. Kiara had seemed perfect when Malcolm first introduced her. She was 34, a real estate agent specializing in investment properties, beautiful and ambitious and attentive to Malcolm in ways his previous girlfriends hadn't been. He'd had 2 failed engagements before her, relationships that had fallen apart and left him devastated. I'd watched my son doubt himself, question whether he'd ever find someone who truly wanted him. So when Kiara walked into my home that first time, carrying expensive wine and complimenting the original craftsman details, I'd been relieved, grateful even. She asked thoughtful questions about my career. I'd worked as a hospital administrator and taught business classes at night for years. She was enthusiastic when I mentioned my retirement plans, supportive in a way that felt genuine. She called me Mom within 3 months of dating Malcolm. I loved her immediately. That's the part that hurts most. I actually loved her. The house they were moving into, my house, sits in Atlanta's West End Historic District. I bought it in 1993 for $47,000. Scraped together the down payment by selling my late mother's jewelry and working double shifts for 6 months straight. Every single mortgage payment for 32 years I made alone. Every repair, every renovation, every property tax bill, me, just me. The house is worth $520,000 now. Gentrification hit West End hard over the past decade. My neighbors sold to developers one by one, but I held on. This house was my retirement security, my nest egg. The physical proof that all those years of sacrifice meant something. Malcolm didn't know the exact value. I'd never told him. Why would I? It was mine, and someday, when I was gone, it would be his. That's how it was supposed to work. But Kiara knew. Kiara knew everything. They moved in that September. Kiara was warm, helpful, respectful. She insisted on contributing to groceries. She and Malcolm talked about wedding plans at the dinner table, and Kiara always made sure to ask my opinion, to include me. For the first month, maybe 6 weeks, everything felt fine. Then the suggestions started. 2 months in, Kiara mentioned over dinner that I might be more comfortable in the converted basement apartment. She framed it as consideration. I'd have my own space, my own entrance. She and Malcolm needed privacy as newlyweds. I agreed. I didn't want to cause tension, didn't want to be the overbearing mother-in-law. So I moved my belongings downstairs, out of the bedroom I'd slept in for 3 decades. Within a week, Kiara had rearranged the entire main floor. My photos came off the walls. My furniture disappeared, replaced with pieces she'd ordered. When I asked about it, she smiled sweetly and said, "We're just making it feel like home." Home. My home. That she was redecorating like I was already gone. But here's what I need you to understand. I didn't see it then. I told myself she was just nesting, just excited about being a newlywed. I told myself to be patient, to give her space, to not be that mother. I was so desperate not to lose Malcolm that I gave up everything else. You're probably wondering why I didn't just leave right then, why I didn't pack my bags and move to Savannah like I'd planned. Let me explain what was holding me back. This house, these walls, these floors, this kitchen, they're not just property to me. Every room holds a memory of raising Malcolm alone. His first steps in the living room, his homework spread across this dining table, his high school graduation party in the backyard. 32 years of my life are embedded in this place. Walking away felt like erasing myself, like admitting that everything I'd built didn't matter. The contractors started showing up 4 months in. I'd come home from visiting friends to find strangers measuring rooms, taking photos, discussing renovation potential. Kiara said she was exploring options to increase the home's value for everyone's benefit. Then I found the proposals. $85,000 for kitchen expansion, $45,000 for master bath renovation, $30,000 for a deck addition. Each one listed the owners as Kiara Dennison and Malcolm Richardson. My name wasn't anywhere. When I confronted her, Kiara looked at me with this expression. Not quite pity, not quite contempt, something in between. "Obviously, we'd get your approval," she said. "We're just planning ahead for when Malcolm inherits." When, not if. When. Like I was already dead. Malcolm said nothing. My son, who I'd worked myself to exhaustion for, who I'd sacrificed every dream to raise, stood there silently while his wife of 3 months planned my house's future without me. That's when the phone call happened, the one that changed everything. 3 days ago, I was in the basement doing laundry. The old heating vents carry sound from the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I'd given up, straight down to where I was standing. I heard Kiara's voice, cold and businesslike, nothing like the sweet tone she used around Malcolm. "Once she's out, we'll file for adverse possession," she was saying to someone on the phone. "He's been managing the property. She's elderly. She probably won't fight it. If that doesn't work, we pressure her to sell and he takes his rightful inheritance now." My hands froze on the laundry basket. I stood there, barely breathing, listening to my daughter-in-law plot to steal my house. "The property's worth $520,000, Kiara continued. "Even if we split it with her, that's $250,000 each. But if the adverse possession claim works, it's all ours." There was a pause, then, "No, Malcolm doesn't know the full plan. He thinks I just want privacy. He's easier to manage when he doesn't see the whole picture." Easier to manage. My son was a pawn, and so was I. I recorded every word. Georgia's a one-party consent state. I could legally record conversations I was part of or that happened in my own home. The next day, while they were at work, I called Leon. Leon Hayes had been my friend since childhood. We'd grown up 3 houses apart, played together as kids, stayed in touch through the years. He'd become a real estate attorney. And now I needed him desperately. "I need to protect my house," I told him, my voice shaking, "and I need to do it without Malcolm knowing until it's done." Leon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I have a solution. It's called an irrevocable living trust." He explained it carefully. I'd transfer the house into a trust. My sister Claudette would become the trustee, the legal manager. I'd remain the lifetime beneficiary, meaning I could live there until I died and no one could force me out. Malcolm would inherit, but only after I was gone. Any attempt to sell, transfer, or claim ownership while I was alive would be legally void. It would protect me, and it would protect Malcolm from himself, from the woman who was using him to steal from his own mother. I signed the papers the next week. Kiara and Malcolm had no idea. While they were planning my eviction, I was securing my future. And that brings us back to this morning. Back to Kiara's cold smile and Malcolm's empty eyes and the words that nearly broke me. "Your mother leaves tomorrow, Malcolm. I mean it. Get her out." I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. Then I set my coffee mug down carefully on the counter. My hands had stopped shaking. Something had shifted inside me. The fear had burned away, leaving only clarity. "But you forgot something crucial, son," I said quietly. Malcolm's face twisted with irritation. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Kiara interrupted, her voice sharp. "She's stalling. Malcolm, I told you she'd make this difficult." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Tried to find the boy I'd rocked through fevers, the teenager I'd tutored through algebra, the young man who'd thanked the strongest woman I know in his high school graduation speech, that Malcolm was gone. The man sitting across from me was a stranger wearing my son's face. "I'll pack my things," I said calmly. "But first, I think you should know—" My phone buzzed on the counter. Perfect timing. I glanced at the screen, then looked up at Kiara. Her face was smug, victorious. She thought she'd won. "That's my sister Claudette," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She's arriving from Savannah tomorrow morning." I paused, letting the next words land with full weight. "With my attorney, Leon." The color drained from Kiara's face so fast I almost pitied her. Almost. "What?" Malcolm looked confused, turning to his wife. "Why would Mom need an attorney?" Kiara recovered quickly. I had to give her credit. "This is ridiculous. Malcolm, your mother is being dramatic. There's no need for lawyers. We're family." "Exactly," I said softly. "We're family. Which is why I never imagined I'd need legal protection from my own son." The silence that followed felt like falling. Have you ever seen someone's whole scheme collapse in real time? Because that's exactly what happened next. Kiara's practiced composure cracked just slightly, a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her jaw. Malcolm looked between us, utterly lost, like a child watching his parents fight in a language he didn't understand. I picked up my coffee mug, rinsed it in the sink, and walked toward the basement stairs. Before I descended, I turned back one more time. "Get some rest," I told them. "Tomorrow's going to be a very long day." I could feel their eyes on me as I disappeared down the stairs, but I didn't look back. To understand how I'd been blind to Kiara's manipulation, I need to take you back to the beginning, to when Malcolm first brought her home 14 months ago, and I actually believed she loved my son. I need to take you back to where it all started. Not 8 months ago when they moved in, not 14 months ago when Malcolm met Kiara. Further back, to the night that shaped everything that came after. Malcolm was 6 years old when his father walked out. I remember it like yesterday, coming home from my hospital shift to find Leonard's closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter. Not even a full page, just 3 sentences. I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out for this life. Don't try to find me. Malcolm was asleep in his room, his Spider-Man nightlight glowing in the darkness. He had no idea that when he woke up the next morning, his father would be gone. That it would just be us. Just the 2 of us against the world. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Kiara would issue my eviction notice 32 years later, and made a decision. I could fall apart or I could survive. For Malcolm, I had to survive. So I worked. God, did I work. I was a hospital administrator during the day, managing patient services and staff schedules. The pay was decent, but not enough. Not for a mortgage and a growing child. So 3 nights a week, I taught business classes at the local community college. I'd leave Malcolm with my sister, Claudette, rush to campus, teach until 9 p.m., then drive home exhausted to kiss my sleeping son goodnight. The sacrifices came in 1,000 small ways. Missing Malcolm's soccer games because I was grading papers in my car between jobs, eating ramen and canned soup for dinner so Malcolm could have chicken and vegetables. Wearing the same 3 work outfits for years so Malcolm could have new school clothes each September. Postponing my own master's degree, the one I'd dreamed about since college, so I could afford Malcolm's college fund. But here's what you need to understand. It wasn't all sacrifice. It wasn't all hardship. There was joy, too. So much joy. Sunday morning pancakes in our small kitchen, Malcolm standing on a chair to help flip them, getting batter everywhere. Teaching him to ride a bike in Adair Park on a spring afternoon, running behind him as he wobbled and laughed and finally found his balance. His high school graduation where he stood at the podium and said, "I want to thank the strongest woman I know, my mom, who gave me everything." I cried that day. Happy tears, proud tears, tears that said every sacrifice had been worth it. We were close, Malcolm and I. Closer than most mothers and sons, probably because it had always been just us. He called me every Sunday during his college years at Georgia Tech, every single Sunday, like clockwork. He brought me flowers on Mother's Day, not store-bought arrangements, but hand-picked bouquets he'd assembled himself. On his 30th birthday, he hugged me tight and whispered, "You're my hero, Mom. Everything I am, I owe to you." I believed him. That's the part that makes this hurt so much. I believed every word. My retirement plan had been simple, carefully constructed over years. Once Malcolm was settled and independent, I'd move to Savannah to be near my sister Claudette. She had property there, a small cottage I could live in. I'd convert my Atlanta house to a rental property. The gentrification of West End meant I could get good rental income and finally relax. Finally breathe, finally live for myself after 3 decades of living for everyone else. I'd earned it. God knows I'd earned it. But then, 14 months ago, everything changed. Malcolm called on a Sunday evening, and his voice had that excited quality I hadn't heard since his early 20s. "Mom, I met someone special. I want you to meet her." After 2 failed engagements, after watching my son question whether he'd ever find lasting love, I was just happy he sounded happy. Her name was Kiara Dennison. She was 34, a real estate agent specializing in investment property flips. Malcolm had met her at a property showing. He'd been looking for investment opportunities, trying to build wealth the way I'd taught him. She'd been the agent. They'd started talking about market trends and property values, and somehow that conversation had turned into coffee, which turned into dinner, which turned into something more. Their first dinner at my house, Kiara arrived carrying a bottle of expensive wine, something French with a label I couldn't pronounce. She was beautiful in that polished, professional way. Hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, designer clothes that looked expensive but not flashy. She walked through my home with genuine appreciation, running her fingers along the original woodwork. "These craftsman details are incredible," she said. "You don't find quality like this anymore. When was this house built?" 1920s, I told her, pleased that she noticed. "I've tried to preserve the original character." "You've done an amazing job." She smiled warmly. "Malcolm told me you bought this place as a single mother. That must have taken incredible courage." I liked her immediately. She seemed interested in me, not just as Malcolm's mother, but as a person. She asked about my career, my years teaching, my retirement plans. When I mentioned Savannah, she was supportive, enthusiastic even. "You deserve to relax after everything you've done," she said. "Malcolm's told me how hard you worked to raise him alone." Looking back now, I can see what I missed. Every question about the house, every compliment about my investment, every mention of property values and market appreciation. She was gathering information, calculating, planning, but I didn't see it then. I saw a woman who seemed to genuinely care about my son. The courtship happened fast. Within 3 months, Kiara was calling me Mom. She invited me to wedding planning sessions, texted me photos of dress options, asking for my opinion, made me feel included and valued. After Malcolm's previous relationships, women who'd seemed indifferent to me, who'd treated me like an inconvenience, Kiara felt like a gift. The red flags were there. I just refused to see them. Kiara would ask detailed questions about the house. "How much did you pay for it back in 1993? What do you think it's worth now? Have you ever had it appraised?" I thought she was just professionally curious, making conversation about what she knew, real estate. She'd mentioned casually that Malcolm deserved to benefit from my investment since he grew up here. "All those years in this house," she'd say. "It's as much his home as yours." Once she mentioned she'd looked up the property records. "Just out of professional curiosity," she explained. "I like to track market trends in historic neighborhoods." Professional curiosity. That's what she called it. Malcolm was 38, desperate for stability after 2 failed engagements that had left him questioning himself. He missed every warning sign. Or maybe he saw them and chose to ignore them because he wanted this relationship to work so badly. They got engaged after 8 months. Fast, I thought, but Malcolm was an adult. He knew what he wanted. Or so I told myself. When they asked to move in temporarily before the wedding, it seemed reasonable. Reasonable and temporary. 2 words I'd regret for the rest of my life. I said yes, without hesitation, without boundaries, without protecting myself. And I postponed my Savannah plans. Again. Put my life on hold. Again. Sacrificed my dreams. Again. Because that's what I'd always done for Malcolm. Let me tell you exactly what I'd sacrificed in dollars and cents, because numbers don't lie the way people do. The house, $47,000 in 1993. I scraped together the down payment by selling my late mother's jewelry, the only inheritance I'd received, and working double overtime shifts for 6 months straight. My hands were so tired some nights, I could barely grip the steering wheel on the drive home. Every single mortgage payment for 32 years I made alone. Not one missed payment, not one late fee. Every repair came from my salary. New roof in 2003, $8,500. HVAC replacement in 2010, $6,200. Kitchen renovation in 2015 when the cabinets finally rotted through, $18,000. Malcolm's education. Private school when the public schools in our district were failing, $12,000 a year for 4 years, $48,000 total. Georgia Tech, fully funded by me, $35,000 a year for 4 years, $140,000 total. Not a penny of student loans. I'd promised myself Malcolm wouldn't start his adult life in debt. His first car, purchased outright when he turned 22, $15,000. The $25,000 I lent him for his business startup 5 years ago. Money he never repaid. Money I never asked for back because he's my son and you don't keep score with family. Do the math. Add it up. $250,000 minimum, conservatively. not counting food, clothes, birthday parties, Christmas presents, summer camps, or the 1,000 other expenses that come with raising a child alone. $250,000 I'd invested in my son's life. And now that house I'd sacrificed everything to buy was worth $520,000. West End gentrification had turned my modest investment into substantial wealth. My neighbors had sold to developers one by one, taking their payouts and leaving. But I'd resisted. This house was my retirement security, my nest egg, the proof that all those years of exhaustion and sacrifice had meant something. Subscribe if you think parents deserve better than betrayal, because what I discovered next will shock you. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments what's holding you back. Remember Kiara, Malcolm's wife of 3 months, the woman who'd researched property values before she'd ever met my son, had been planning to take it all. 6 weeks ago, everything shifted. The suggestions became demands. The warmth became coldness. Kiara stopped pretending. Then I heard the phone call, standing in my basement, laundry basket in my hands, listening to Kiara's voice drift through the heating vents from what used to be my bedroom. Once she's out, we'll file for adverse possession. He's been managing the property. She's elderly. She probably won't fight it. If that doesn't work, we pressure her to sell and he takes his rightful inheritance now. His rightful inheritance, while I was still breathing, still living. Still very much alive and entitled to the home I'd worked myself nearly to death to afford. That's when I knew. Kiara hadn't fallen in love with my son. She'd fallen in love with a $520,000 property and found the weak-willed heir who'd give her access to it. The next morning, while they were both at work, I called Leon Hayes. My childhood friend, the boy who'd lived 3 houses down and walked to school with me every day from first grade through high school. We'd stayed close through the years, through his law school and my single motherhood, through his career and my struggles. He'd become a real estate attorney, successful and respected. I need to protect myself, I told him, my voice shaking, and maybe protect Malcolm from himself. I explained everything. The overheard phone call, the contractor proposals with my name missing, the way Kiara had systematically erased me from my own home while pretending to care. Leon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I have a solution. It's called an irrevocable living trust. Let me explain how this works." What I did next would save my home, but it might cost me my son. The erosion of my life didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, deliberately, like water wearing away stone. One small violation at a time until I barely recognized my own home. It started 2 months after they moved in. We were having dinner. Chicken I'd roasted, vegetables I'd prepared at the table I'd owned for 28 years. Kiara set down her fork and smiled at me with what looked like genuine concern. "Evelyn, I've been thinking," she said softly. "You might be more comfortable in the converted basement apartment. You'd have your own space, your own entrance, complete privacy." She reached over and touched Malcolm's hand. "Malcolm and I are newlyweds. We need our privacy too. I'm sure you understand." Malcolm nodded without looking at me. Just nodded like we were discussing which brand of paper towels to buy. "Mom, it makes sense," he said to his plate. "The basement's nice. You fixed it up yourself." I had fixed it up. 10 years ago, I'd converted it into a small apartment thinking maybe one day I'd rent it out for extra income. Private entrance, small kitchenette, full bathroom. It was nice. But it wasn't my bedroom. It wasn't the room where I'd slept for 32 years, where I'd rocked Malcolm through nightmares as a child, where I'd cried alone after his father left. "Okay," I heard myself say, "if that's what you need." I moved my belongings downstairs that weekend. 32 years of sleeping in the same room, and I packed it all into boxes like I was a guest who'd overstayed my welcome. Malcolm helped carry boxes. Kiara supervised making suggestions about what should go where, in my own house. Within 3 days, The main floor transformed. I came upstairs one morning to find my family photos gone from the living room walls. The pictures of Malcolm's childhood, his graduations, our life together, all removed, replaced with abstract art Kiara had ordered online. "Where are my photos?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Kiara looked up from her coffee, my coffee maker, my kitchen, my table. "Oh, I packed them safely in the basement for you. We're just making the space feel like home." Home. My home. That she was redecorating like I was already dead. My reading chair, the one I'd sat in for 20 years reading novels on Sunday afternoons, appeared in the basement. My favorite lamp. The throw pillows my mother had embroidered. All migrated downstairs while I slept. I tried to reclaim small territories. I'd bring my coffee mug back upstairs to the kitchen cabinet. The next morning, it would be in the basement again. My reading chair returned to the living room. 2 days later, back in the basement. Each time I pushed back, Kiara pushed harder. "This is our space now, Mom," Malcolm finally said when I protested finding my grandmother's quilt removed from the couch. "You have your space downstairs. Can't you just let us have ours?" Our space. Their space. My space. In my own house, I'd become a tenant, but I told myself it was temporary, told myself they'd find their own place soon, told myself I was being the bigger person, the understanding mother, the woman who didn't make waves. I was being erased, one possession at a time, and I was letting it happen. Late one night, it must have been 3 a.m., I heard Kiara's voice from upstairs. I'd come up to get water, and her voice drifted from the bedroom, my bedroom. She was on the phone, speaking low but not quite low enough. "Phase 1 complete," she was saying. "She's in the basement. Next, we need to establish Malcolm as primary resident for the legal claim." I froze at the bottom of the stairs, glass in my hand, heart hammering. Legal claim. Primary resident. Phase 1. This wasn't about privacy. This wasn't about newlywed space. This was strategic, calculated, a plan. 4 months after moving in, the contractors started appearing. I'd leave to visit my friend Margaret, come home 2 hours later, and find strangers in my living room, men with measuring tapes and cameras discussing wall removal and floor plans. "What's going on?" I asked Kiara, who was standing in my kitchen like she owned it. "Oh, just exploring some options." She smiled brightly. "We want to increase the home's value for everyone's benefit. Everyone's benefit. But I'd never asked for renovations, never wanted strangers assessing my home's renovation potential." The proposals started appearing on the dining table like bills I was expected to pay. Kitchen expansion, $85,000. Master bath renovation, $45,000. Deck addition, $30,000. I picked up the kitchen proposal and my stomach dropped. Owner, Kiara Dennison and Malcolm Richardson. Not Evelyn Richardson, not the woman who'd owned this house for 32 years, not the woman who'd paid every mortgage payment, every property tax, every repair bill. My name was nowhere. I found Malcolm in the backyard, pretending to inspect the fence. "Why is my name not on these proposals?" I kept my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, they're just preliminary. Obviously, we'd need your approval." "Then why isn't my name listed as owner?" "Kiara's just planning ahead. For when—" He stopped himself. "For when what, Malcolm?" "For when I inherit," he said quietly. "You said you were moving to Savannah anyway. Kiara's just being proactive. When I inherit." Like I was already gone. Like my death was an inconvenience they were planning around. That night, while they were out at dinner, I did something I'd never done before. Something that made me feel like a criminal in my own home. I went into their bedroom. My bedroom. My hands were trembling as I opened Kiara's nightstand drawer. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd find nothing, that I was the crazy one. But I wasn't crazy. The folder was labeled Property Acquisition Plan in Kiara's neat handwriting. Inside, copies of my deed, property tax records, an appraisal showing the house worth $520,000, and handwritten notes in Kiara's script. Establish residency in 6 months minimum. Document financial contributions. Claim elder neglect, incompetence if resistant. Adverse possession filing. Next spring. My vision blurred. The folder slipped from my hands onto the bed. If your family ever turned against you, subscribe. This gets so much worse. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments. What's holding you back? She'd been planning this. From the beginning, maybe even before she met Malcolm, she'd been planning to take my house, and she'd written it down like a business plan, like I was a property to acquire, an obstacle to remove, an elderly woman who probably wouldn't fight back. Have you ever held proof that someone you trusted has been plotting against you from the start? It's like being hit by a truck. The impact, then the pain, then the numb shock that won't let you process what just happened. I took photos of every page with my phone, put the folder back exactly how I'd found it, and went downstairs to my basement apartment to figure out what the hell I was going to do. 3 months in, Kiara hosted my birthday dinner at my house with my extended family. Except I wasn't the host, I was a guest. Kiara had invited everyone, my sister Claudette, Malcolm's cousins, Aunt Josephine, even some of Malcolm's college friends. She'd cooked, using my kitchen, my dishes, my recipes, and decorated with flowers and balloons. "Surprise!" everyone shouted when I came upstairs. It should have been touching. It should have made me feel loved. Instead, I felt like an outsider at my own party. Kiara played hostess, serving food, making sure everyone had drinks, accepting compliments on the decorations. Malcolm stood beside her, proud, like they'd accomplished something wonderful together. I smiled, thanked everyone, blew out 64 candles on a cake I hadn't chosen. Then I overheard Kiara talking to Malcolm's cousin Dante in the hallway. "I'm really worried about her," Kiara was saying, her voice low and concerned. "Her memory's been getting worse. She gets confused about conversations we've had. Malcolm's concerned she might not be safe living alone much longer." My memory? Confused? Not safe alone. I stood in the doorway to the living room, my living room, and felt the room spin. She was lying, making up symptoms, planting seeds of doubt about my competency, and it was working. Over the next few weeks, the phone calls started. Aunt Josephine, "Sweetie, Kiara mentioned you've been a bit forgetful lately. Are you feeling okay?" Malcolm's college roommate to Malcolm overheard, "Man, your wife said your mom's been struggling. That's tough. My grandmother had dementia. It's hard to watch." My cousin Angela, "Malcolm told me they're worried about leaving you alone. Have you thought about assisted living?" Assisted living. I was 64 years old, healthy, sharp, capable. And suddenly, my family was discussing assisted living like it was inevitable. I confronted Malcolm directly. "Why is Kiara telling people I'm forgetful?" "I'm not forgetful, Malcolm. I'm not declining. What's going on?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like he used to do as a teenager when he'd been caught in a lie. "Kiara's just worried about you, Mom. We both are. You have seemed a bit distracted lately." Distracted or being systematically erased from my own home? "That's dramatic," he said, and his tone, dismissive, irritated, felt like a slap. This was my son, the boy I'd raised alone, and he was looking at me like I was the problem. I called Claudette that night and broke down crying. "She's stealing my house," I sobbed into the phone. "She's stealing it right from under me, and Malcolm's helping her do it. And nobody believes me." Claudette was furious. "That woman is a con artist. You need legal protection. Right now, I'm coming up there." "Not yet," I said. "I need evidence first. I need proof. Otherwise, it's just my word against hers, and you've heard what the family thinks. They think I'm losing my mind." "Remember Malcolm. My only son, the boy I'd raised alone for 32 years after his father abandoned us, had been living in my house with Kiara for 6 months, and I was just discovering the full extent of her scheme. But I had 2 allies. Malcolm's cousin Dante pulled me aside at a family gathering a week later. "I don't believe what she's saying about you," he said quietly. "Something's wrong with her, not you. Be careful, Aunt Evelyn." "Then say something," I begged. "Tell Malcolm." "I can't." He looked miserable. "I don't want to cause family drama, but I'm watching, and I see what she's doing." He saw, but he wouldn't speak. I was alone. Then Pastor Jerome stopped by unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon. Jerome had baptized Malcolm. He'd known our family for 20 years, watched Malcolm grow up, presided at my mother's funeral. He sat in my basement apartment because I didn't feel welcome upstairs anymore, and spoke plainly. "Evelyn, I've watched that young woman work on Malcolm for months. She's changed him. The boy who used to volunteer at church every Saturday, who called you every Sunday, who had such a good heart. I don't see him anymore. I see someone she's created, someone who does what she wants, believes what she says, sees the world through her eyes." "What do I do?" My voice cracked. "You protect yourself," he said firmly. "Because she's not going to stop, and Malcolm's too deep in her influence to see clearly. Protect yourself first, save your son second." His words gave me the clarity I'd been lacking. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was being methodically, systematically pushed out of my own life, and if I didn't act soon, I'd lose everything. 6 weeks before that breakfast table eviction, I was in the basement doing laundry. The house was built in the 1920s, and the old heating vents carry sound from the upper floors straight down to the basement. I'd never paid attention before, but that day I heard Kiara's voice drifting down from my bedroom above. She was on the phone. Her voice was different. Cold, businesslike, nothing like the sweet tone she used around Malcolm or the family. I turned off the washing machine and stood perfectly still, listening. "Once she's out, we'll file for adverse possession," Kiara was saying. "He's been managing the property. She's elderly. She probably won't fight it. If that doesn't work, we pressure her to sell and he takes his rightful inheritance now." My hands froze on the laundry basket. "The property's worth $520,000. Kiara's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing a business transaction. "Even if we split it with her, that's $250,000 each. But if the adverse possession claim works, it's all ours." A pause while the person on the other end spoke. "No, Malcolm doesn't know the full plan. He thinks I just want privacy. He's easier to manage when he doesn't see the whole picture." Easier to manage. My son was a pawn, a tool, a means to steal my home, and I was the obstacle Kiara was planning to remove. I stood there in my basement, surrounded by laundry that needed folding, listening to my daughter-in-law plot my destruction. Then I pulled out my phone and started recording. That afternoon, while they were both at work, I called Leon. "I need to protect my house," I said without preamble, "and I need to do it without Malcolm knowing until it's done." Leon asked careful questions. I explained everything. The basement relocation, the contractor proposals without my name, the property acquisition plan folder, the gaslighting about my memory, the overheard phone call. "Do you still have recordings of that phone call?" he asked. "Yes, Georgia's a one-party consent state. It's legal." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." His voice was calm, professional. "We're going to establish an irrevocable living trust." He explained it carefully. I'd transfer the house into a trust. My sister Claudette would be the trustee, the legal manager. I'd be the lifetime beneficiary, meaning I could live there until I died and no one could force me out. Malcolm would still inherit, but only after I was gone. Any attempt to sell, transfer, or claim ownership while you're alive becomes legally void, Leon said. "It protects you completely, and it ensures Malcolm gets his inheritance eventually, but only when it should happen, when you're actually gone." "How fast can we do this? If you can come to my office tomorrow, I can have papers ready by end of week. I met with Leon secretly the next day, signed papers I never thought I'd need, transferred my home into a trust to protect it from my own son and the woman he'd married. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 32 years building this house into a home for Malcolm. Now I was legally protecting it from him. But Leon had one more suggestion. Start recording conversations, he said. Georgia's one-party consent. You can legally record any conversation you're part of. When Kiara mentions relocation, when she questions your competency, when Malcolm sides with her, record it. Build a case. So I did. My phone became my weapon. Every time Kiara made a comment about my memory, I was recording. Every time Malcolm dismissed my concerns, I was recording. Every time they discussed my house like I wasn't in the room, I was recording. I was building evidence. Documenting the systematic erosion of my autonomy, my home, my life. Kiara's scheme was already dead. Her adverse possession plan, her property acquisition timeline, her systematic isolation of me from my family, all of it was based on a house she'd never legally touch. She just didn't know it yet. And when that breakfast confrontation happened, when she finally dropped the pretense and issued her eviction notice, I was ready. I had legal protection. I had recordings. I had proof. I had my sister coming with my attorney, and Kiara's face when I told her. When I watched the color drain from her cheeks as she realized her whole plan was collapsing, that moment made every sleepless night, every basement exile, every gaslighting comment worth it. The confrontation was coming, and I was armed for battle. The morning after the breakfast table eviction, I made the call. "It's time," I told Claudette. Just those 2 words. She understood immediately. "I'll be there by 2 o'clock, she said. "Leon's coming with me." I spent that morning in my basement apartment, listening to the sounds above me, footsteps, drawers opening and closing, the distinctive screech of packing tape being pulled from the dispenser. They were packing my belongings. Kiara had started immediately, assuming I'd comply like I'd always complied before. Each rip of tape felt like another piece of me being erased. I sat on the basement couch, my couch, exiled from my living room, and tried to breathe normally. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. In a few hours, everything would change. I'd either save my home or lose my son, maybe both. At 1:53 p.m., I heard car doors slam outside. I smoothed my dress with trembling hands, took 3 deep breaths like my therapist had taught me years ago. 1, 2, 3. In, out, in, out, in, out. Then I walked up the stairs and opened the front door. Claudette stood on my porch, and the fury on her face could have melted steel. She was 67, my older sister by 3 years, and she'd driven 3 hours from Savannah for this moment. Behind her stood Leon Hayes, carrying a leather briefcase that suddenly looked very official, very serious, very real. "Where are they?" Claudette asked. I pointed upstairs. The sound of packing tape answered her question. Leon touched my shoulder briefly. "You're doing the right thing," he said quietly. "Remember that." Remember. Leon Hayes, my childhood friend who'd walked to school with me from first grade, now a real estate attorney, had helped me establish the irrevocable living trust that legally protected my home from Kiara's scheme. I led them to the dining room, the same table where Malcolm had done his homework for 12 years, where I'd graded papers late into the night, where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and birthday celebrations and ordinary Tuesday evenings that I'd thought would last forever. Now it would host a reckoning. "Malcolm!" I called up the stairs. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Can you and Kiara come down here, please? My sister's here." Footsteps on the stairs. Malcolm appeared first, looking confused. "Aunt Claudette?" He smiled uncertainly. "This is a surprise. What are you—" He stopped when he saw Leon. The briefcase. The formal way we were all standing around the dining table. Kiara appeared behind him, and I watched her expression shift in real time. Surprise to confusion to calculation. She was smart enough to know this wasn't a social visit. "What's going on?" Malcolm asked. Leon set the briefcase on the table with deliberate precision. Click. Click. The latches popped open with sounds that seemed too loud in the sudden silence. He removed a folder, placed it on the table, spread documents across the wood surface like evidence at a trial. "I'm Leon Hayes, Ms. Richardson's attorney." His voice was professional, measured, calm. "I'm here to clarify the legal status of this property." Malcolm's eyes widened. "Attorney? Mom, what?" "This home," Leon continued, his finger tracing the text on the top document, "was transferred into an irrevocable living trust on September 12th of this year. Evelyn Richardson is the lifetime beneficiary with exclusive right to occupy the property until her death. Claudette Richardson serves as trustee. Malcolm Richardson is named as the beneficiary upon his mother's death." He looked up, directly at Kiara. "Any attempt to remove Ms. Richardson, sell this property, claim ownership through adverse possession, or otherwise transfer title while she lives is legally void and will be prosecuted as fraud." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Malcolm's face as he processed the words, watched understanding dawn slowly, like sunrise through fog. "What?" He looked at the documents, then at me. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Kiara recovered faster. She always did. "This is ridiculous." Her voice was sharp, defensive. "Malcolm, your mother is being paranoid and vindictive. We never said anything about adverse possession or stealing. This is—" "Because 6 weeks ago," I interrupted, my voice quiet but steel strong, "I heard you on the phone planning exactly that. And I recorded it." Kiara's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained all the blood from her body. "You what?" "I recorded you," I repeated, "planning to file for adverse possession, planning to claim I was incompetent, planning to steal my house by manipulating my son." "That's illegal!" Kiara's voice rose to a near shriek. "You can't—" "Georgia is a one-party consent state," Leon said calmly. "Ms. Richardson broke no laws. She had every legal right to record conversations in her own home." I pulled out my phone, held it up. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "Would you like to hear it, Malcolm? Would you like to hear your wife explain how she planned to steal my house and manipulate you into thinking it was rightfully yours?" Malcolm held up both hands like he was trying to stop a fight. "Stop, just stop. Both of you. Mom, I don't understand any of this. We just wanted you to have your own space downstairs. We weren't trying to steal anything. This is crazy." "Crazy?" Claudette's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Malcolm Richardson, I changed your diapers. I watched your mama work herself to exhaustion raising you alone. I was there for every sacrifice she made, every dream she postponed, every tear she cried after your daddy walked out. And now you stand there defending a woman who researched how to legally steal from your mother before she even met you?" "What are you talking about?" Malcolm looked genuinely lost. Leon slid another document across the table. "Your wife accessed public property records on this house 2 weeks before she met you at that property showing. Time-stamped searches. All documented." I watched Kiara's face, watched her scramble for an explanation. "So what?" Her voice turned vicious now, the sweet daughter-in-law mask completely gone. "I'm a real estate agent. I research properties all the time. That doesn't mean anything. This is ridiculous." "You also own a condo on Peachtree Street," I said, each word weighted with the pain of months of lies. "You've been renting it out for $2,400 a month while living here rent-free. You told Malcolm your lease ended." "You lied." The room went absolutely still. Malcolm turned to Kiara slowly, like he was moving through water. "You own a condo." Kiara's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You said you were renting, Malcolm continued, his voice hollow. You said your lease ended. You said that's why we needed to move in here temporarily. Malcolm, don't let them turn you against me. Kiara grabbed his arm, desperation bleeding through her voice. Your mother is a bitter old woman who can't let go. You deserve this house now, not when she's dead. You grew up here. You lived here your whole life. You have a right to it. Have you ever watched someone you love realize they've been manipulated? It's like watching them drown in real time, gasping for air that won't come. Malcolm pulled his arm away from Kiara. Not roughly, just away. You didn't marry my son, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. You married my property value. Malcolm sank into one of the dining chairs, head in his hands. His shoulders shook. Subscribe to see if Malcolm finally chooses his mother. The ending will surprise you. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments, what's holding you back? Kiara switched tactics immediately. Tears appeared. Real or manufactured, I couldn't tell anymore. Malcolm, I love you. Her voice went soft, pleading. I love our life here. I love what we're building together. Don't let your mother destroy our marriage over her paranoia, over her need to control everything. That's enough. The voice came from the doorway. Pastor Jerome stepped into the dining room, and I realized he'd arrived with Claudette. I'd been so focused on the confrontation, I hadn't even noticed him standing there. Child, Jerome said, looking directly at Kiara. I've known Malcolm since he was 6 years old, baptized him myself, watched him grow into a good man with a good heart. He moved closer to the table. I've watched you change him these past months. The boy who called his mother every Sunday doesn't call anymore. The man who volunteered at church every Saturday hasn't shown up in months. The son who loved his mama? I don't see him anymore. I see someone you've created, someone who does what you want, believes what you says, sees the world through your eyes. Jerome's voice was gentle but firm. You isolated him from everyone who might see through you. That's not love, child. That's control. Remember, Kiara, my son's wife of 3 months, the woman who'd planned to steal my house from the moment she'd researched property values, stood there watching her entire scheme collapse. Malcolm raised his head. His eyes were red, wet. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months. Malcolm, look at me, I said, my voice trembling, not with weakness, with the weight of 32 years of love colliding head-on with betrayal. He looked. I raised you alone, I said. Each word felt like pulling glass from a wound. I worked 2 jobs so you could have a childhood. I ate ramen so you could have real food. I wore the same 3 outfits for years so you could have new school clothes every September. I gave up my master's degree, my career advancement, my retirement dreams. I gave you everything I had and everything I was. My hands were shaking now. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. And I would do it all again. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I postponed. I would do it all again because you're my son and I love you. A single tear escaped down my cheek. I hadn't wanted to cry, but 32 years of love can't hold itself back forever. But I will not let anyone erase me while I'm still breathing. Not even you. Malcolm's face crumpled. He saw it. Finally, after months of dismissing me, gaslighting me, siding with Kiara against me, he saw what he'd done. The mother he'd been preparing to evict was breaking, and he'd done this. Kiara made one last desperate play. Malcolm, tell them we're staying. She grabbed his arm again, her voice commanding. This is our home, our life, our future. Tell them. She emphasized our, trying to create an us versus them, trying to make me the villain, trying to pull Malcolm back into her orbit one more time. Malcolm looked at his wife, then at me. Then at the legal documents spread across the table, proving everything I'd said was true. The silence stretched so long I thought my heart might stop. Finally, Malcolm spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "Kiara, did you research this house before we met?" Kiara hesitated, just for a second. But that second answered everything. "Did you lie about your lease ending?" Another pause. Malcolm stood slowly like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "I need time," he said to no one in particular. "I need to think." Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, not a choice. Just retreat. Kiara exploded. "You're choosing her over me? After everything we've built? After everything I've done for you?" Malcolm's voice was hollow, empty. "You built it on lies." "Fine." Kiara grabbed her purse from the side table, her face twisted with rage. "Fine. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll take you to court. I'll claim domestic abuse, elder manipulation, coercion. I'll destroy both of you, and we'll counter," Leon interrupted calmly, "with fraud, attempted theft, defamation, and conspiracy to commit property theft. I'd strongly advise against it, Ms. Dennison." Kiara stared at him, at me, at Malcolm, who wouldn't look at her. Then she turned and walked to the door, yanked it open, stopped in the doorway and turned back one last time. "You deserve each other," she spat. "A pathetic old woman and a mama's boy who'll never be a real man." The door slammed so hard the windows rattled, and Malcolm, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone for 32 years, stood in the wreckage of his marriage and his relationship with his mother, looking utterly lost. "I need to go," he whispered. Then he walked up the stairs without another word. We heard him moving around in the bedroom, heard drawers opening, heard a duffel bag being zipped. 10 minutes later, he came back down. Duffel bag over his shoulder. Wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. "I'm staying with Dante for a while," he said to the floor. I need time." Then he left too. The house went silent. Claudette started clearing the documents from the table. Leon clicked his briefcase shut. Pastor Jerome squeezed my shoulder once before quietly leaving. I stood in my dining room, my house, legally protected, legally mine, and felt more alone than I'd felt in 32 years. I'd saved my home, but I'd lost my son. 48 hours after the confrontation, I watched from my living room window as Kiara loaded a U-Haul truck in my driveway. She moved with sharp, angry efficiency. Furniture she'd bought, the modern couch, the glass coffee table, the abstract art, all went into the truck. She didn't knock on my door, didn't acknowledge my existence, just loaded her things like she was erasing her presence from my life as efficiently as she'd tried to erase me from my own home. Malcolm stood in the driveway, hands in his pockets, looking shell-shocked, lost, like a child watching his parents fight and not understanding how the world could change so completely in such a short time. Kiara said something to him. I couldn't hear through the window, but I saw her mouth move, saw Malcolm's head shake slightly, saw her face twist with rage. Then she climbed into the U-Haul and drove away without looking back. Malcolm stood there for a long time after she left, just stood there in the driveway, staring at nothing. I didn't go to him. I wanted to, but I didn't know what to say anymore. That afternoon, Leon called. "She's already contacted an attorney," he said. "Her lawyer called mine this morning. She's threatening to sue for her rightful share of the property's appreciation during the marriage." My stomach dropped. "Can she do that?" "She can try," Leon said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Georgia law is very clear. Your separate property from before the marriage remains separate. She lived there 8 months. She has zero claim. Let her waste her money on lawyers." But Kiara's real damage wasn't legal. It was social. Within 3 days, my phone started ringing, and it didn't stop. Family members Kiara had contacted, spinning her version of events. She'd been busy before she left town, planting her poison one phone call at a time. My cousin Angela was the worst. "How could you destroy your son's marriage?" she demanded. "That poor girl was trying to help, and you turned Malcolm against her with your paranoia. You should be ashamed." Poor girl. The woman who'd planned to steal my house was a poor girl now. Some relatives believed Kiara completely. Others started to doubt. Aunt Josephine called crying, apologizing. "I should have seen through her lies about your memory," she said. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry I believed her." But the damage was done. The family was fractured. Half believed me. Half thought I was a controlling, manipulative mother who'd driven away her son's wife out of jealousy and spite. Meanwhile, Malcolm stayed. Not in the master bedroom. He moved into his childhood bedroom. But he stayed. For 2 weeks, we existed in the same house like ghosts haunting each other. He avoided eye contact, ate dinners in silence, left the room when I entered. I tried to reach him. "Malcolm, we need to talk about this." "I need to process, Mom." "But if we could just—" I said I need to process. Processing turned into withdrawal. He called in sick to work. I heard him on the phone, his voice flat and emotionless. Stopped answering calls from friends. Spent hours sitting in his room, staring at his phone. I knew what was on that phone. Kiara's texts. I'd see his face change when notifications came through. Hope, then pain, then confusion. Over and over like a cycle he couldn't break. One night I heard him on the phone through his closed door. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he was saying to someone. "She had all this evidence, but that's my mom. How could she have been recording conversations without telling me? How could she have set up a trust without saying anything?" My heart broke. Even now, even with all the proof, part of Malcolm still thought I was the villain. His cousin Dante called me on a Monday morning. "Aunt Evelyn, Malcolm needs to get out of that house, away from both of you. He's drowning and he doesn't even know it." "I'm not stopping him from leaving," I said quietly. "I know, but he won't leave on his own. He's paralyzed. Can I offer him my spare room? Would you be okay with that? Would I be okay with my son leaving because he couldn't stand to be near me?" "Yes," I said, "please." Dante came over that evening, talked to Malcolm for an hour behind closed doors. When Malcolm finally came out, he had a duffel bag over his shoulder. "I'm going to stay with Dante for a while," he said to the floor. Couldn't look at me. I nodded. "Okay. I need space from everything." "I understand." It was a Tuesday morning. Clear sky, birds singing, life going on like nothing had changed. Malcolm walked toward the door, stopped, turned halfway back. "I'll call you, Mom." Then he left. He didn't call. 4 months passed in a silence so heavy it felt like drowning. Then Kiara filed for divorce. The petition arrived via Leon, and reading it made my blood boil. Irreconcilable differences was the stated cause, but the demands told the real story: alimony, equitable distribution of marital assets, and the kicker, including appreciation value of jointly occupied real estate. She was still trying to get my house. Her lawyer's argument was almost creative in its audacity. Malcolm had lived in the home his entire life, they claimed. He'd helped maintain it, contributed to its upkeep. Therefore, he had an ownership interest, and as his spouse, Kiara was entitled to half of that interest, half of something Malcolm never owned to begin with. The case was heard in Fulton County Family Court 3 months after filing. I sat in the gallery, Claudette beside me, watching Leon systematically dismantle Kiara's claims. He was methodical, precise, devastating. The property was acquired by Mizaki Richardson in 1993, 18 years before the defendant met the petitioner's son. Title has remained solely in Ms. Richardson's name. Malcolm Richardson has never held any ownership interest, legal or equitable. He presented evidence, property records, the trust documentation, timestamp searches proving Kiara had researched the property before meeting Malcolm. The defendant entered this relationship under fraudulent pretenses, Leon continued. She maintained a separate rental property while residing rent-free in Ms. Richardson's home under false pretenses. She systematically isolated the petitioner, spread false rumors about mental decline, and plotted to steal the property through adverse possession. He played the recording. Kiara's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating. Once she's out, we'll file for adverse possession. He's been managing the property, she's elderly, she probably won't fight it. The judge's face remained neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. Kiara's lawyer tried to argue, tried to claim the recording was inadmissible, that the property searches were coincidence, that Kiara's hidden rental property was irrelevant. Leon demolished every argument with Georgia law and documentation. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. The court finds no basis whatsoever for equitable distribution. Ms. Dennison has demonstrated a clear pattern of deception and financial manipulation. This was not a marriage entered in good faith. Divorce is granted, no alimony, each party responsible for their own legal fees. Furthermore, Ms. Dennison is prohibited from contacting any member of the Richardson family under penalty of harassment charges. The gavel came down. Kiara's lawyer looked furious. Kiara herself sat frozen for a moment, then stood abruptly. As she walked toward the exit, she turned and looked directly at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure, absolute. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead right there. But I held her gaze, and I didn't look away. Remember Malcolm, my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man Kiara had manipulated into nearly destroying me, didn't attend the hearing. He'd sent his own lawyer to represent his interests, but he couldn't face being in that courtroom. The marriage was over. The legal threat was over. Malcolm's inheritance was intact, but my family was still shattered. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I received a certified letter. It was from Pastor Jerome, but inside was something I hadn't expected. A notarized statement from a woman named Jasmine Crawford, 42 years old, living in Charleston, South Carolina. My hands shook as I read her words. My name is Jasmine Crawford. I was engaged to Kiara Dennison 3 years ago before she met Malcolm Richardson. She targeted my family the same way she targeted yours. I had to sit down. My mother owned a brownstone in Charleston worth $600,000. Kiara and I met at a real estate conference where I was speaking about property investment. She was charming, attentive, interested in my work. We started dating. Within 3 months, she'd moved in with me and my mother. The pattern was so familiar, it made me sick. She tried to convince me my mother was incompetent and should sell the property. When I refused, she escalated. She claimed I was financially abusive, that I was taking advantage of my mother. She tried to get legal guardianship. The case failed when the judge saw through her lies. The next day, she disappeared, took everything she could carry, and vanished. Jasmine's next words hit me like a truck. When I saw her marriage announcement to Malcolm Richardson in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I recognized the pattern immediately. I wanted to warn you, but by then it was too late. Pastor Jerome contacted me after your court case. I wanted you to know you're not alone. She's done this before, and she'll do it again. I forwarded the letter to Leon immediately. He called back within an hour. Subscribe if you want justice for victims like Evelyn. She's not done fighting yet. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments. What's holding you back? Evelyn, you need to hear this. I contacted authorities in South Carolina. Kiara Dennison is wanted for fraud related to an elderly victim. Similar scheme, befriending family members to access property owned by elderly parents. The case is under investigation. Kiara wasn't just a manipulative daughter-in-law. She was a professional con artist with a history of targeting families for their property. Remember Jasmine Crawford, the woman from Charleston whose mother owned a $600,000 brownstone? The one Kiara had targeted 3 years before Malcolm had sent me proof that my daughter-in-law was a serial con artist. I made a copy of Jasmine's letter and mailed it to Malcolm's apartment. included a simple note. This is who she was. You weren't weak. You were targeted by a professional. It was the first communication I'd had with my son in months. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm sorry. 22 words. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not an explanation for months of silence. But it was something. I saved that text, read it probably 100 times over the next few weeks, analyzing every word, wondering if not ready to talk yet meant someday he would be, or if it was just something people say when they're ending a relationship slowly. Remember Pastor Jerome, the man who'd baptized Malcolm 20 years ago, who'd watched Kiara systematically change my son, had connected me with Jasmine and helped expose the truth. But something had shifted in me during those months of silence. For 32 years, I'd believed being a good mother meant sacrifice without boundaries. I'd welcomed Malcolm's wife without question, moved to the basement when asked, tolerated displacement because I thought love meant never saying no. I'd been wrong. Real love requires boundaries. Enabling disrespect isn't love. It's self-destruction. So I started rebuilding my life, not waiting for Malcolm to need me, not putting my dreams on hold anymore. I converted the main floor of my house into an Airbnb, my home, my rules, my income. Within 2 months, I was generating $3,500 to $4,000 monthly, money that was mine, in a home that was finally, legally, indisputably mine. I joined a book club with women my age. We met Thursday evenings, drank wine, discussed novels I'd always meant to read, but never had time for when I was working 2 jobs and raising Malcolm alone. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because unpacking 32 years of single-parent martyrdom required professional guidance. My therapist helped me understand that I'd built my entire identity around being Malcolm's mother, that I'd measured my worth by how much I could sacrifice, that I'd confused martyrdom with love. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while centering Malcolm's needs. Margaret, who I'd known since hospital administration training. Diane from the book club, who became a real friend, not just an acquaintance. And I started dating, tentatively, carefully. A retired history professor I met at a community lecture series about Atlanta's civil rights history. Coffee turned into dinner, turned into Sunday afternoon walks through Piedmont Park. It wasn't serious, might never be. But it was nice to be seen as a woman with her own life, not just Malcolm's mother or someone's victim. My life was no longer on hold waiting for Malcolm to need me. 15 months after the confrontation, my phone rang. Mom? My heart stopped. Can we meet? Not at the house. Neutral ground. We met at a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta, a place neither of us had been before, carrying no memories of better times. Malcolm looked older, thinner. He'd let his beard grow in, and there were lines around his eyes I didn't remember. We sat across from each other, menus untouched. I've been in therapy, Malcolm said quietly, for almost a year now. I nodded, didn't speak, let him take his time. I'm unpacking a lot. How Kiara isolated me, how she manipulated isn't even the right word, controlled. She controlled how I saw everything, including you. His voice cracked. I was so desperate to prove I could make a relationship work. After 2 failed engagements, I thought something was wrong with me. When Kiara showed interest, when she seemed perfect, I ignored every warning sign because I needed it to work. I know, I said softly. I chose a 3-month marriage over a 32-year relationship with my mother. Malcolm looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in over a year. I can't take that back. I can't undo it. But I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. We started meeting monthly after that. Sunday dinners at restaurants, never at my house. The house was my sanctuary now. Malcolm understood that, respected it. Progress was slow. Trust wasn't rebuilt in grand gestures, but in inches, in showing up, in small conversations that didn't revolve around Kiara or the betrayal. Malcolm apologized repeatedly. Evelyn forgave, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. The words "I'm sorry" felt insufficient for the magnitude of what had happened, but they were a start. 2 years after that confrontation at my breakfast table, I'm sitting on my front porch with morning coffee, watching the sun rise over West End, and I can finally say this: I'm thriving. I still live in my craftsman home, the house I fought for, the sanctuary I reclaimed. My Airbnb business generates steady income, enough that last spring I finally took that Europe trip I'd postponed for years. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I walked streets I'd only seen in magazines and ate food I couldn't pronounce and felt, for the first time in decades, like I was living for myself. Remember, this was the same house where Kiara had tried to erase me, where Malcolm had stood silent while his wife issued my eviction notice, but now it was truly mine again, protected by the trust Claudette managed as trustee. I'm dating someone. A retired history professor I met at a community lecture series about Atlanta's civil rights movement. It's tentative, careful, but comfortable. We take our time. There's no rush anymore. My book club meets monthly in my living room, the same room that once hosted a legal reckoning. Now it's filled with laughter, wine, heated debates about novels we love or hate. The space has been reclaimed, and I volunteer at a domestic violence shelter downtown, teaching financial literacy workshops for women escaping abusive situations. I tell them what I learned the hard way. Protect your assets before you need protection. Don't wait until you're being evicted from your own life. Malcolm's rebuilding too. He has his own apartment in Buckhead now. He's still in therapy, working through the manipulation, the guilt, the shame. He's dating cautiously, learning to trust his own judgment again. We share Sunday dinners twice a month, always at restaurants, never at my house. The house is my sanctuary now, and Malcolm respects that boundary. We meet on neutral ground, and we're careful with each other. He's met the man I'm dating, even approves, though I can see it's strange for him. Seeing his mother as a woman with her own romantic life. Our relationship is cordial, even warm, but it's not what it was. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. I've forgiven Malcolm, but forgiveness doesn't restore automatic trust. Trust now requires maintenance, consistency, proof over time. It's a different relationship than we had, maybe a more honest one. Kiara? She disappeared after the divorce was finalized. Last I heard through the grapevine, she'd moved to Texas and was engaged again. Another man, another widowed mother who owned property. I sent an anonymous tip to the family, forwarded them Jasmine Crawford's letter and the court documents. Whether they heeded the warning, I don't know. I did what I could. Let me tell you what I learned through all of this. For 32 years, I believed being a good mother meant sacrifice without boundaries. I thought love was measured by how much you tolerated, how much you gave up, how small you made yourself so others could grow. I was wrong. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-destruction. And when I finally set a boundary, when I said, "This is my home and you cannot erase me," I didn't lose my son. I lost the version of our relationship that was built on my silence and his entitlement. What we're building now is harder, messier. But it's real. It's built on mutual respect, not maternal martyrdom. If you're sacrificing yourself hoping family will appreciate it, hear me. They won't. Not until you stop. Not until you show them that your dignity isn't negotiable. Protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. And sometimes loving someone means protecting them from their worst impulses, even if they hate you for it, even if it costs you the relationship you thought you had, because what you gain, your self-respect, your home, your peace, is worth it. This morning, as I sit here with my coffee, I hear a car door slam. Malcolm's car. He's early for our Sunday brunch. He walks up the path carrying flowers. Daisies, my favorite. Progress. I stand, smooth my dress, and meet him at the gate. We hug. Tentative at first, then genuine. His arms tighten slightly, and I feel him relax into the embrace. Morning, Mom. Morning, baby. It's not the relationship we had. It's the one we're earning. And that, I've learned, is enough. The house behind me stands solid. My sanctuary. My hard-won victory. I'm 66 now, silver-haired and stronger than I've ever been, and I'm finally, truly, home. Would you have forgiven your child like I did? Or would you have cut them off completely? At what point does protecting yourself mean losing your family forever? Thank you for listening to my story. Drop your location and country flag and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever had to choose between family and your own dignity?